So this week we got major news regarding the fight to save net neutrality. So as you might have heard, California Governor Jerry Brown has officially signed their state's net neutrality bill into law, making them the third state to codify net neutrality protections, and more importantly, setting a brand new standard for a free and open internet, as their state officially now has the toughest net neutrality protections in the country. However, with good news, we got some bad news almost immediately after, because the Justice Department announced that they would be suing the state of California, challenging this because they claim that this law is illegal. And it's clear that they were anticipating that Jerry Brown would in fact sign this bill into law, because they literally announced this lawsuit hours after it was signed. So for more on this, we go to the New York Times, and Cecilia Kang explains the Justice Department on Sunday sued California to stop the state's new law that would guarantee full and equal access to the internet, a principle known as net neutrality, in the latest legal fight between the state and the Trump administration. Attorney General Jeff Sessions said that California's net neutrality law was illegal because Congress granted the federal government through the FCC the sole authority to create rules for broadband internet providers. States do not regulate interstate commerce. The federal government does, Mr. Sessions said in a statement. Once again, the California legislature has enacted an extreme and illegal state law attempting to frustrate federal policy. Xavier Becerra, California's Attorney General, said the state would defend its new law. California will not allow a handful of power brokers to dictate sources for information or the speed of which websites load, Mr. Becerra said. We remain deeply committed to protecting freedom of expression, innovation, and fairness. State Senator Scott Wiener, an author of the state bill, defended the law after the Justice Department lawsuit was announced. In their world, no one is allowed to protect an open internet, he said. We've been down this road before. When Trump and Sessions sued California and claimed we lacked the power to protect immigrants, California fought Trump and Sessions on their immigration lawsuit. California won, and California will fight this lawsuit as well. Now the question is, if there's two other states that also codified net neutrality laws, Oregon and Washington, why is Donald Trump's Justice Department just choosing to single out California? Well, there's a very good reason for that. It's because this law actually prohibits zero rating, which is something that internet service providers want to be able to do, because this allows them to potentially dominate the market. And it's one of the most anti-competitive practices that they can do. And for those of you who don't know what zero rating means, well, let's say T-Mobile gives you 5 gigs of data each month. Now that's fine if you're just going to be browsing the web and checking your email and looking at Facebook and whatnot. But the thing about 5 gigs is that it seems like a lot. However, if you want to use apps like Netflix and other video streaming services, you might not necessarily be inclined to do that, because obviously that's going to eat up most of your data. But T-Mobile then says in response, well, how about this? If you use our video streaming service, that actually won't count towards your data. In fact, you can binge as much as you want on our video streaming app, but the minute you decide to open up Netflix, well, then we're going to have to penalize you, and that will in fact eat up your data. Now, the reason why internet service providers and wireless carriers more specifically love this is because this potentially allows them to dominate the market, because if all of their customers are disincentivized when it comes to using Netflix, and they're instead incentivized to use their product, well, that allows companies like Verizon and T-Mobile to potentially end up killing off Netflix one day if everyone opts to use T-Mobile streaming service, for example. And this is wrong, because they're not becoming popular simply because they're offering consumers a product that's superior, but instead they're becoming more popular because they're basically strong-arming people into using their product by punishing customers and competitors. Now, Verizon in response will argue, well, why would you be against this? Because we're just giving customers an additional option because they can use up our app and in turn have more data. But the question that I always say is, well, if you truly care about customers, then why don't you just stop imposing these arbitrary data caps to begin with? You see, they impose these data caps because they want to make more money from customers, and then after they've already extracted more money from customers with these data caps, Then they try to kill off the competition by saying, well, if you use our video streaming service instead of Netflix, well, that won't go towards your data. I mean, that's wrong. It's anti-competitive. It's one of the most anti-competitive things that they can do. And that's why they're fighting so hard to stop any regulation with regard to zero rating, because this will one day allow them to dominate the market potentially if states don't start taking action when it comes to zero rating. So that's why they're suing and singling out California specifically. And that's why when you look at California, well, lobbyists who work for Verizon and Comcast and AT&T fought so hard to stop this legislation because they don't want regulations on zero rating to become the new normal. And passing this legislation could lead to a domino effect where other states see that this is working really well for consumers in California, and they might want to replicate this law. So getting to Jeff Sessions' comments, I want to reiterate something he said here because it really speaks to the absurdity of this situation and how Republicans in general have been trying to gaslight consumers when it comes to this issue. So Jeff Sessions said the California legislature has enacted an extreme and illegal state law. So in his view, protecting consumers and saving net neutrality is extreme, but in actuality, what's true? Well, it's people like Jeff Sessions and Ajit Pai who are actually the extremists because they're going against the overwhelming majority of the American people who support net neutrality, and that includes 73% of Republicans. So Americans don't view this as a partisan issue. Most Americans support net neutrality. So by saying that this law is extremist, you're actually proving to be the extremist because Californian lawmakers are just doing what their constituents want them to do. This is something that lawmakers across the country should be doing, quite frankly, because Americans want net neutrality. We want a free and open internet. We don't want you to empower these internet service providers to be able to control the content that we see. We just want to pay one price and access the totality of the internet. But since there's money to be made, and since these ISPs are buying off politicians, essentially contributing millions of dollars each year to their campaigns and also lobbying them relentlessly while they're on the side of ISPs. So normal Americans, we support net neutrality. Nobody should be against net neutrality unless you are either a shareholder for Verizon or Comcast or AT&T or you sit on their boards, or unless you're a politician who actually benefits from campaign contributions and they just paid you off and now you're trying to do their bidding since they paid you to do that. But the fact remains that no matter how hard you go after net neutrality, this issue is a losing battle for you. It is a political battle that will exact a high cost on Republicans and any lawmaker, quite frankly, across the country that chooses to go against the American people. Because again, we've spoken, we support net neutrality, and if you're against net neutrality, you're against the American people. So this lawsuit will go forward, and I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I'm still thankful that California decided to pass this, and I am optimistic. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but the fact that Jerry Brown signed this into law, this is important. Even if we all kind of anticipated that this would happen, it still needs to happen. Lawmakers still need to take action to protect net neutrality because it's too important to not protect. And in the meanwhile, while this lawsuit plays out, I think it's incumbent on all of us to show up to our local city councils and demand municipal broadband, because that's really the way of the future. It'll end the debate once and for all, and we will no longer have to rely on internet service providers like Verizon and Comcast to get internet. That is the ultimate goal when it comes to having a free and open internet, and really securing a free and open internet for generations to come.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.